Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Motor1.com Test Car Happy Hour. My name is Seyth Miersma, and joining me today are a bunch of editors. All these guys have been driving cars, and we want to talk about them. I've got directly to my right on the screen, Brandon Turkus, Brett Evans. Senior editors Brett Evans and Jeff Perez are below me in my format. Your mileage may vary. Really happy to say that we are talking about a couple of EVs today. So yet again, we are broadcasting to both Motor1.com channels and Inside EVs channels. I promise to have content for those of you who love both electrons and burning gas. And no matter where you're watching this and no matter what you're interested in, we would love to hear from you. So please do leave us a comment, ask us a question wherever you are. If you're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever this is streaming, you're seeing it, you can just leave a comment wherever you are. We will get it. We'll throw it up on the screen and we will respond to you. You can see we've got some questions, some icebreakers up there already. Please feel free to respond to those and we will get going. But it looks like we've got eyeballs. So not to delay this any longer, Brandon, we sort of had a debate which vehicle we wanted to put on the cover this week, and I call it an experiment because in my mind, the Toyota BZ4X is actually still a very interesting vehicle. I have not driven one. I read our coverage on both the sites. I think for a lot of you guys, for some of the team, BZ4X is a question that has been asked and answered already, even though it's a relatively new vehicle. So you've got one in your driveway. What are your early first impressions of Toyota's electric vehicle?
Well, I will say, based on the name alone, it's a terrible copy machine. Doesn't do that job. It doesn't do that job as well. Doesn't print, fax, scan, any of those things. No, the BZ4X. I had pretty low expectations going into this. Some of those based because I have eyeballs and I can see what the thing looks like, and others because people I know and kind of respect have said it's terrible. Mm-hmm. As Chris Bruce chimes in, yes, it's a really bad name for a car. Just so we're clear, it stands for Beyond Zero, and then the 4X is all-wheel drive, dual motor, all that nonsense. Or I guess, I don't know.
Real quick on the name, let me interrupt you. If we're British, if we're acting British and we call it a BZ4X, is it any better? Anybody prefer BZ4X?
No, that's actually worse. That's
kind of namey though, right?
BZ does roll off the tongue well. Like I'll give them that. Like BZ4X is not a difficult thing to say, but I mean, it is generally speaking a bad name.
I think this is really funny I can't pronounce your name, that Thal XB also calls out BZ4X as a verification code for a website login. You, sir, I think you're not wrong, but having an unpronounceable handle.
Yeah, I was gonna say your handle looks like a CAPTCHA that you have to type in to make sure you're not a robot. So I don't think we can take his opinion very valid.
So so now that we've the horse is thoroughly dead. A lot of what I've been told about the BZ is that it's not a very good EV. I don't think that is unfair. I think relative to what you can get elsewhere, the charging speed, which on this dual motor model is only peaks at 100 kilowatts, is incredibly underwhelming. The range is fine, but I've got the shortest range model right now, the dual motor limited, and it's 222 miles, which is pretty mediocre too. By those measurements alone, it's not a very good EV. It is nice enough to drive. I mean, the performance, it's only, I want to say 214 horsepower and let's see, 124 pound-feet of torque from either of the front or rear motors. So it's not a very powerful car by any stretch, but it's got that EV instant performance that you can call on, and so it feels nippy in traffic. I haven't really had it on a freeway yet. Honestly, my main issue with it is the ride quality is bruising, and making matters worse is the fact that this car doesn't feel very well made. I've going over bumps, it would trigger the impact was so harsh it would trigger the ABS. I can see the mirrors like rattling in their housings when go over a bump or like face a stiff breeze or shut the door. Like everything in here feels very cheap and very flimsy and in a pretty un-Toyota way. I'm kind of amazed. And this isn't this I don't think this is a pre-production car. It does have a manufacturer plate on it, but it has about 900 miles on the clock. This might only be its second or third loan. So this isn't a car that's gone through its life just abused by auto journalists. I'm, like I said, probably the only second or third person to abuse it. So yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot going on here that is not very great for a car that in this trim or in this example costs $52,000.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I'm looking at our initial first drive that we've got on Motor1. I'm not sure if that one is on Inside EVs, but it's like the. Unfortunately, if our real world driving impressions aren't like adding up to a lot of really meaningful stuff. So what you're saying, Brandon, even if you like, maybe let's say for the sake of argument that maybe this particular example had some manufacturing problems and most of them are screwed together with the quality that we would expect from Toyota, right? Even there, the paper case for the car is not very strong. The range, again, the range sort of per dollar is fairly low. I know that you said that you haven't done a ton of significant driving yet, so maybe you don't have a great idea in terms of like what your real world sort of efficiency is looking like yet. But
no, I won't have that until I do like a proper test this weekend on my like regular test loop.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, I'm also fortunate enough that I have charging at home, so it's really range anxiety isn't something that I deal with. The one thing that does really annoy me regarding range is that so far as I can tell, Kyle, if we could rewind the video to when I'm focused on the cluster real quick. Basically there is, aside from the little blue bar next to the range estimate there is no other range indicator in the vehicle that I can find. I have no idea percentage wise what the state of charge is, which is just a truly baffling decision for me. It's very, very limited in terms of the information that it provides either in the instrument panel or in the touch screen. So I don't have a lot of idea of what's going on. I've been driving around without the windows or without the air conditioning on because it's a lovely balmy 80 degrees here in Detroit. And it's saying I still have about 170 miles of range, I think, when I just got out of it. And that's, I'm guessing with around 70% charge. I don't really know. So, I mean, the range hasn't been, super ideal, but I don't know. Do we know, has Tom done a 70 mile an hour range test with one of these yet?
I don't know. Actually, that's a great thing to check. If not, like it's definitely on the docket, but would be really interesting. I think that I'm just going back into we've got our sort of private chat going here too. And apparently Kyle and Brett were having a conversation about whether or not BZ4X is actually, I don't want to say fully representative of what Toyota is capable of because it's a car that's on sale today.
I don't think it is at all.
They're offering it to the public, but Brett, the point that you're making is that like it also is coming at a very strange time for Toyota from a product planning standpoint, and maybe there are better things yet to come. Is that sort of the thesis?
That was actually Kyle's point, is that like with everything that's going on with management shakeups at Toyota and everything like that, BZ4X was kind of this like brave, like, oh, here's what we're gonna do, and then the specs on it that we've discussed are very, very mediocre, if not disappointing, for a brand new ground up vehicle. And that was Kyle's point, is like maybe, with all the restructuring that Toyota has been undergoing as a corporation, that, there's probably, hopefully, something a little bit better. Toyota's always been a little bit more, in spite of like the fact that they have had Prius on the market for almost 25 years now, and that's a very very notable electrified vehicle. It's always had, except for a few different variations, it's always had a nickel-based battery instead of a lithium-based battery. Toyota's always just kind of been like content to stick to proven technology instead of push the boundaries, even in terms of their electrified vehicles that they're known so well for. So I don't know. I personally think this is the best that's yet to come from Toyota. I just think that they're always going to kind of stick to smaller batteries, less aggressive technology, less aggressive charging speeds, kind of assuming that more people are going to use it like Brendan is, with the charger at home, not having to worry about range anxiety too much and that kind of a thing.
Well, I mean, generally speaking, I don't remember what the exact stat is, but I want to say that something like 80 or 90% of EV buyers have home charging at their disposal. But the problem is that Americans are so conditioned that we need more than we actually do, that the range is a thing that is a barrier to entry for a lot of them. So I'm really concerned,
especially since it'd be one thing if this was a real incredible price leader, but you can get a Kia Niro EV or a Hyundai Kona EV for less money with more range and faster charging, and those aren't even EV specific products. You
can get a Leaf Plus with more range in this thing, which is kind of insane to say because
a Bolt EUV
or a Bolt, just
right. And the Bolt EUV will drive itself and it has about as much power.
Yeah, it feels like this is already outdated as it hits the market. Like the Bolts, the Leaf, like those are older EVs that are still pretty good and still offer better range than this thing, and this is like brand new. I don't really understand the strategy unless, like Brett said, this is just step one and what will hopefully be a much more impressive range of EVs, but it's pretty disappointing.
My question is, I don't really care about who is going to buy this right now. I'm sure there will be somebody that has bought RAV4s for years on years on years. Who's going to buy this in 3 or 4 years when the market is advanced and the BZ4X is still sitting there with maybe 250 miles an hour? Maybe they do an OTA and squeeze some more out of the battery, but relatively mediocre straight line performance and poor range and slow charging speeds. Who's going to buy that 4 or 5 years from now when the market is back, by and large, doing a lot more than that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a really good question, and because it's a practical question. Like, who wants? Historically, cars have had a much longer useful life cycle than things like consumer electronics, right? But like what we might be seeing now is cars entering a different phase of development with electric vehicles, because on one hand, maybe the hardware, if properly constructed, could last a lot longer because so much can be done with software. On the other hand, you have these really like hard points of battery packs and motors, which when built to kind of an older or aging standard won't be as good or won't be nearly so competitive as long. Ultimately, like a lot of this stuff, it comes down to price, right? Like if the used BZ4X that you're looking at is sort of follows the path of the original Nissan Leaf in the used market, then maybe it would make a ton of sense for a limited number of people because it'll be a smoke and value.
I was going to say, I'll tell you what
I was going to bring up about Toyota though, and I think this is much smarter people than me have written intelligently on this subject, but this is not necessarily just a Toyota problem, having a new product that feels antiquated in the EV space, right? This is kind of a Japanese automaker problem right now, and to a certain extent, like what we're seeing are the results of either a lack of faith and commitment on the part of the Japanese automaker, to a certain extent, I think a lack of incentive based on what the Japanese government was offering. Whereas certainly in like California and parts of the U.S., you've seen like the ball move forward a lot because of larger, things like organizations like CARB and EPA, like mandating essentially that things have to change. Certainly that's been the case in Europe too. And then Korea is a stellar example of that, right? Where the Korean companies are actually quite advanced, I think, in terms of some of this, the EV stuff, because it matters to them on their home turf in addition to mattering globally. So, yeah, it's interesting. So, and in terms of the experiment, I guess we're not getting a ton of comments and questions about the car. So maybe the original thesis that everybody, even including people who are really interested in EVs, are not super interested in the BZ4X holds some water, right? Like this is not as fascinating as some of the other vehicles that we've talked about. That said, so Jonathan Brown, we can do some quick reactions. If Kyle has a second to pull up the article from I think we saw some leaked Model 3 shots. We can give you off the cuff impressions of it, but I saw it in passing. I did not digest them deeply. What else do we have? We've got Zach Kane saying, I saw a Subaru version the other day. This is the Subaru Solterra, which is the kind of Subaru twin of the BZ4X. And it was only charging at 25 kilowatts the whole time it was at the 150 kilowatt charger. It's a really good point. This is a 400 volt architecture.
This is 400 volt architecture. It's 150 kilowatt peak with front wheel drive, but only 100 kilowatt with all wheel drive.
Yeah.
Which is
much a problem with the charging network as it is the car, though.
Yeah, I was going to say I've I've been to chargers with cars that charge at 270 kilowatts and they only get 25 for some reason. Like it's our charging infrastructure in this country is just that flaky. So I'm not gonna condemn the. There's plenty of other things to condemn the Toyota on that are fair. I'm not gonna condemn it on something that's unfair.
That's absolutely true. Okay, we're gonna do fast reactions here too because of our old pal Jonathan Brown asking. He said the new Model 3 Spy Shot was really sexy looking. Dare I say, like I'd imagine a four-door Ferrari sedan if accurate. Those of you watching live right now or watching on video after the fact can see the Spy that we had of the Model 3 refresh is not I mean, you're seeing a lot of the nose, the front wheel, and then it's kind of half got a car cover half pulled off. I encourage you to go to InsideEVs.com and just either look on the front page or Google or search for Model 3, and you'll probably pull these up if you haven't seen it yet. I don't know. I'm not seeing what I would call a revolutionary change to the styling here. Am I completely wrong? It still feels very aero dictated.
Do you know what it looks like? It looks like a Prius.
Oh yeah, like the new Prius.
So two things. One, we should be all of this just guzzling salt over this. Like we've seen no spy shots to corroborate that this is even the right shape. Like we know nothing, and then just a totally finished car pops up undisguised. Like that looks like late pre-pro, like bordering on production already. So yeah, I don't think I would not be surprised if it came out a week from now that this is just some elaborate ruse.
It looks like a Ferrari Roma that you get on Wish.
Oh my god, it's Ferrari is designed by ChatGPT, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like somebody told ChatGPT, I want a Tesla Ferrari in a warehouse with a car cover half off.
No, I mean, let's not go too crazy because it does look good. It's like a nice design. It's a nice basic design. So let's not get too bashy on it.
Right. I just don't think it's real. I just don't think that's all it is. I don't think that this thing actually exists. I think we have very little evidence to support it being a real physical thing and not somebody playing a very elaborate joke on Tesla fanatics around the world.
Tesla doesn't do concepts though. We didn't see the original Model 3 until it came out. Like they don't really do concepts or prototypes or spy photography. It's not super common for them.
Gee, maybe they should start.
I mean, I'm just saying this could be the car because they haven't done teasers of their cars. They kind of just drop cars.
I'm not even saying a teaser. I'm saying we have no Model 3 spy shots to like support anything that's going on here.
But there weren't those back in like 2015 or whenever it came out either. Like they literally just dropped the car. So
and it looks just like a facelift, like a new bumper. I mean, the rest of the body looks pretty similar. So I mean, that's not necessarily something you need to go take prototypes out on the road for. I wouldn't think. I
mean, living in Detroit, I see facelifted cars on a regular basis here with just camo on the front and rear. So maybe it's real. I think it looks fine. It is what it is. It's a Tesla. I
love that. I love that we've pivoted to spy shots here. Thank you again, Jonathan Brown, for sparking an
derailing
interesting discussion. Yes, we will. And again, encourage you. The link is in the chat. Encourage you to go through and read that article. To be very clear, yes, this is a rumor-based post. We're not exactly sure what we're looking at here. It's an interesting idea if it is a refreshed Model 3, but we'll know when we'll know. We'll know when Elon has a press conference and decides to show us the new Model 3. Which is something that we kind of half expected at the last investor day and didn't get. So we do know that it's coming at some point soon. We have not.
It's gonna debut on Twitter. It's just gonna be Elon just dropping one picture of the car and just saying tits, and that's it.
I also do want to say, you guys, we have two great podcasts. We have the Inside EVs podcast where the guys do nothing but talk about EV news. We have the Rambling About Cars podcast on Motor1, where those guys do nothing about talking about non-EV car news. This one we generally try to stick to the ones that we've driven. So that was a diversion. I diverged there, but let's return to the cars that we've been driving this week. Why don't we switch from one brand new but old feeling Toyota product to what I was in, which is a brand new but actually old Toyota product in terms of the Lexus IS500, which I had last week and just absolutely completely adored yet again. Like this is a super old formula for a Lexus vehicle. Back when it was, I mean, when I guess like this actually really harkens back to the last ISF too. So what we've got is a 5-liter naturally aspirated 5-liter V8 under the hood here, making 472 horsepower and right around, I think it's 398 pound-feet of torque. It is just a beautiful motor, right? Like it makes all of the right engine and exhaust sounds. The car is very quick, as we were talking about before. Some outlets are estimating at around 4.4 seconds, 0 to 60. It feels all of that for sure. You guys will see, those of you watching along will see one of my favorite sights in the automotive universe. I don't know if this is just me. You guys can tell me I'm crazy, but like when I get a Lexus and I open it up and a Lexus F Sport something and it's just got the full red interior, there's just some part of my born in the 1970s brain that responds to that in a massively positive way. It makes me feel both sporty and rich at the same time. Is that crazy?
This and like the toasted caramel interior are the best interiors Lexus has ever done.
Yeah,
so good.
The red is so good.
Totally agreed. The red and the toasted caramel. I'm a big fan of toasted caramel on a nori green LC is just perfection.
You know what they do, like with the red, you're right. The toasted caramel one too. They really the color feels flooded in the interior, right? They're really good at getting, like I noticed this time, like the speaker grills and surrounds and things like that are color matched perfectly to the leather too. So it feels like somebody was just able to take like a magic paintbrush and make everything exactly the same tone despite the material, which is really fantastic. So I think it looks really good. There's nothing revolutionary about the way this car goes down the road. It is not like I went back to the IS350 first drive that I did years and years ago when kind of the bare bones version of this first debuted. And I don't think that there's anything that I felt differently about this past week than I did back then. It's a really nice handling car. It is not like the most involving driver's car ever. It is not the most precise sports car or sports sedan ever. But it's almost more fun as a result of that, right? It's really easy to get the rear wheels to step out in this thing. There's plenty of power. Playing around, going through the gears on the paddle shift gearbox is satisfying, even though it doesn't feel like a race car in any stretch of the imagination. It's a really nice balance of an old school idea, lots of performance in a luxury car that still has reasonable handling. Doesn't have punishing ride quality or anything like that. But again, nothing new. There's nothing particularly new at all about this vehicle.
Was that Lily wants to chime in? I hear.
She's trying to imitate the sound of the downshift.
That's pretty good, actually. Not bad. Yeah, and it is rear wheel drive. This is. Do they make the 500 in an all wheel drive? I don't think so. So. Exactly as everyone intended it to be.
So I did the first drive of this, and I'm getting in before Jeff and Brett can shut me down. I was just pretty deeply unimpressed with this. I had really high hopes for it. It kind of touched on what I was talking about last week with the RX 500 F Sport that I was driving, where it doesn't really feel like Lexus F means anything. Like F Sport performance, I'm like, okay, so is this going to be closer to like a full tilt F, or like I was really hoping for an ISF revival because I loved that car for all of its many faults. And this it left me really lukewarm. Like, yeah, the engine is fantastic and sounds really great, but it doesn't really do anything besides just shout that, hey, I have a V8. Yeah.
I agree that it should have probably just been called an ISF. I don't really know what Lexus is doing in terms of their branding or marketing, but I'm also not smart enough to understand why they would do that. So it's just a semantics thing. Otherwise, I love this car. I would buy this car in a second. It is so much fun. Like Seth said, it's not like a great handling car. Like it's not an M3. It's not even a C63 or anything. It's just crazy, just powerful, big, powerful V8, super comfortable, great interior. Like this is the perfect car for me, to be honest.
But the thing is, it's not actually that fast. Like it's.
Oh, I don't care. It's not. You're right. You got to wind it out so hard. Like you have to rev it to make it do things. Oh, and it's so good when you do. Oh, it just is like. And I will die on the hill that I think it has the best steering out of any of the competitors. I think that like it still feels pretty old school, pretty like heavy, connected to the road, everything like that. It's not being filtered through like an electric pump, I don't think. So, I love it. I agree. I think it's pretty phenomenal. Brandon and I had a conversation because I did the video review of the first drive that he did the written review of, and our opinions just like, they like meshed in some ways and didn't really in others. And you made the amazing point, Brandon, that like we have become so accustomed to amazing turbocharged vehicles nowadays.
Right.
Like, and naturally aspirated V8 feels like a letdown, which is kind of true. Like you got to get this thing up to 5,000 RPM before it starts making good torque. But
we're just so spoiled. And honestly, if I live somewhere like you do in California, where I have access to good roads, like that need to wind it out might be a little bit more charming. But here, where all the roads are straight, I mean, it ends up being more annoying than anything else. And I'm glad Lexus built this car. Like I really, really am. I wish that it had pushed just a little bit further with it and made it a full tilt F car, a little bit harder, a little bit more aggressive, more powerful brakes, even a louder exhaust. I mean, there's just crank everything up by 15% and call it an F car and be done with it.
Well, I think. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, it doesn't really feel that far off of like the RCF. I don't think the RCF is tuned that much tighter than this car is in terms of just handling or ride quality or anything like that. Another car that I really like, even though I know it's completely imperfect, but like, I don't know. I think they really kept that F, sort of performance intact. So they didn't really do anything less. They didn't really do anything more. It just kind of feels like the old school F cars, and it feels a lot like the old school ISF. Sort of.
I think the difference for me is, and I don't think that Brandon's wrong. I think that the last ISF, V8 ISF it wasn't that it was better, it was harsher. I mean, you felt like it was definitely a harder riding car. Now, which one would go around a corner at like VMAX, or at not VMAX, but at like the top speed that you're comfortable with and stick to the ground and feel like it's handling just as well in the meantime? I don't know. I mean, I suspect this one, again, based on the conversation that we had, based on the limited slip differential, like this is probably actually a pretty reasonable handling car, even at kind of track speeds. But like, did the old car reward better on a really great road or in a track environment? Maybe you could make that argument. But I would say like this thing turned all the way up into Sport Plus mode. You're getting enough of that exhaust sound. You're getting like great throttle response, a really nice linear pedal to the point. Yeah, you're missing the punch down low from a turbocharger, or from some sort of electrified performance hybrid or EV. For sure, but the way it rewards, I think, makes up for those things, and the way that it's usable day to day. Jonathan again was bringing up a family sedan. I don't know if this qualifies as a family sedan. It's still a little on the small side if you have kids, but it's definitely doable. But it's definitely a car that you can live with day in and day out and still have a ton of fun with. So I think it's a better balance than the old ISF, personally.
I definitely think it's better balance. I remember the first time that I drove an ISF. I mean, I was a lot younger, a lot more inexperienced, but I remember accelerating away from a stoplight, wide open throttle, and pulling the paddle to upshift to second, and the back end just kind of stepped out and it surged ahead. And I never really got that sensation when I was driving this that, oh, this car could kill me if it wants to. Like it never felt like that hairy. And that's kind of what I was missing.
Well, yeah, they can't all stay the same, and even an older model or older idea in Lexus' platform has got to evolve to a certain extent. But Nick Nordic just brought up strange to review a fossil on inside EVs, and I think that's probably a little correct. We are having our cake and eating it too here, Nick. We are reviewing both gas cars and electric cars for both Motor1 and inside EVs. That being said, stick around because Brandon's about to tell you all about the car that he was driving that I forgot because my notes aren't open right now. Brett's going to tell us all about the Mercedes-Benz EQS SUV.
Yeah, Yeah, EQS SUV, very cool. I liked it a lot. You can definitely tell it's an EQS product. It's got that big old glass panel front grille up, and everything like that. But this is another one though where you have to like dig deeper than the spec chart because it starts at $105,000. So a Tesla Model X is about $5,000 cheaper to start. It'll do 305 miles of range, which is about 50 miles less than Tesla Model X. It has 7 cubic feet of cargo space behind the third row seat, which is less than the Tesla Model X. It doesn't have a frunk, which is less than the Tesla Model X. So you really kind of have to like dig into qualitative arguments to make the case for this thing. There's that third row seat is comically tiny. The cargo space is ridiculous behind it, but it drives so well. It is such a lovely, like, pleasant vehicle to motor around in. I think it's better than the EQS sedan in that respect. It's got better seating position. You don't feel like your feet are way up high because of that battery. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really, really cushy driver this week, and just like a lot of fun to kind of just motor around in quiet Mercedes luxury.
So Mercedes made a big deal when this car launched. I remember because we had some back and forth editing the story of the off-road ability. EQS SUV, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that you've been doing any off-roading, but like carrying on with your Tesla comparison, does that like hold any water in your mind?
I mean, for the one person in the entire world who's going to take either a Tesla or EQS SUV off-road, I do think the EQS SUV is going to be a better pick. The best part about it, they actually, I did the first drive of this last year as well, and they did let us do some off-roading, and the car had all-terrain tires, and the reason that they were able to like justify that for a press trip is because you can get all-terrain tires for your EQS from your Mercedes dealer. So they had the dealer installed all-terrain tire package. We were in Colorado. It had been raining, like torrential rain, for like the 3 weeks previous, and so when we got there, the off-road course was just like slick and gooey and like kind of that like thick red mud that Colorado does. And this thing was just like an absolute billy goat. You get, I think, like 11 inches of ground clearance with the suspension jacked all the way up. The rear axle steering gives it a better turning radius. This isn't hyperbole, a better turning radius than a Jeep Wrangler. So, I mean, you could whip it around really tight corners. It was incredible. It was honestly really, really impressive achievement, and kind of like had me sold on that, Mercedes SUV heritage. It kind of felt at first, there's some photos of them doing some off-roading, but yeah,
I did
like gimmicky at first, but no, it holds up for sure.
I did the prototype ride along before this debuted in Tuscaloosa at their factory, and they had a little off-road course, and I thought the same thing, Brett. I was like, why are they doing this? Like, what is the point of this? Like, first of all, it is true that maybe 1% of customers are probably going to take this thing off onto a trail. But it was genuinely capable. Like, it didn't feel like it was going to scrape on anything. Like, the turning radius was really impressive. I think the rear axle steering really helps with just sort of navigating around the tighter stuff. And yeah, it has an off-road mode, off-road tires. Like, it actually can do some genuine off-road stuff that you probably wouldn't think it could.
Yeah, which is a very silly use case for that car, but nevertheless, like Brandon was alluding to earlier, Americans like to have things and not need them rather than need them and not have them.
Absolutely. Am I crazy in that I think that this is like an actually a pretty good looking car? I've been very down on all the EQ stuff up to this point, and I actually think this one pulls it off somehow. I don't know if it's the ride height or what, but the body shape is better in my mind.
The EQ SUVs in general are better looking than the EQ sedans, because I thought the same thing when I drove EQE SUV a couple weeks ago. The thing about this that it made me realize, this was the first EQ product that I drove after the EQS. Which I really like the EQS. I liked it in the AMG version, the single motor, the dual motor. Like, all versions of it have been very good. But I got into this, I'm like, oh wow, the EQS sedan actually isn't that great. Like, the cabin feels oversized, like you're swimming in it. And this just feels, the EQS SUV just feels like so much more natural of a vehicle in terms of like where your body is at and where you're at in the cabin and like how much room there is around you. Like, it doesn't feel like it's trying to be like some cutting edge thing. It's just a very good SUV. Like it feels like an idealized GLS, to be honest.
Well, I also think, and granted, I'm literally looking at it right now, but like the added height of it too in the body gives an opportunity to do some detailing down low, which to me cuts that kind of bar of soap vibe, that one note, one shape vibe a little bit, and maybe that helps. Definitely anxious to get into one of these too to see what y'all are seeing, but this is a compelling segment, right? We were having this conversation yesterday, and actually, we should probably put this up as some sort of poll if Kyle's able to pull it off. But the question being, we're about to start asking around for long-term vehicles to drive for 6 or 12 months. We're not sure yet. If you guys are watching and you have an idea, we want for an EV. We're probably going to have multiple at some point. But what electric vehicle should we ask for to drive over a long period of time, over 6 to 12 months, for inside EVs and Motor1?
And just to stop everyone, Tesla is not an option. I'm just getting that out of the way right now. Sorry.
Tesla's going to be more difficult. Feel free to give us your honest answer. But yeah, Tesla as ever is more difficult. But no, I mean I think that what Mercedes is working on is really exciting, and every one of the products that I have that I've been in is impressive. They're very deep experiences. This is not a car that you're going to be able to get into even in the lower trim versions and just be able to know how to do everything. Like, have we reached or gone beyond the sort of point of technology saturation in cars like luxury electric cars where they can really afford to put every bell and whistle in it? Is this just massively overkill, or is my brain too calcified to be able to figure it out?
The hyperscreen is overkill. I really dislike the hyperscreen after using it in the EQS and seeing it in the SUV. I think it's going to appeal to a younger demographic, especially when they see it on Instagram with all the ambient lighting like surrounding it. Like, it looks awesome, but the use it's rough. It's really hard to use while you're driving. There's just so many options and features and screens you need to dig through. And
so are you talking about like the hyperscreen itself or like the new infotainment? Because the infotainment layout's common to both screens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the hyperscreen itself just feels like there's so much more going on, and it's hard to like.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, that was it. It just feels like a lot. It just feels like too much going on. It's hard to parse, especially while you're driving. It's not they got rid of a lot of the buttons too that that's every car, but all of the just the basic like HVAC stuff is at the bottom of the screen. You have to look down. I don't know. I'm sounding like an old man when I say all this, but I find it so difficult sometimes.
The one thing that I don't like about the hyperscreen, I kind of dig it because I like that the passenger can do like navigation stuff for you while you're driving. The one thing I don't like though is the new like center display is so wide that your hands cover up most of it when they're on the steering wheel. So if it had like the regular car's narrow display and then a passenger display, I would be 100% sold.
The main problem I have with hyperscreen is that Mercedes has done for a very, very long time as like a leading luxury automaker, they do trim really, 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 really well, like super, super well. And I'd have to play around in the configurator with EQS, but I know on both versions of EQE, if you don't get the hyperscreen, you just get a traditional like S-Class style portrait oriented display at the center, and then this huge swath of wood trim that is just beautiful if you get the right one. And it feels so much more charming, and you really don't give up a lot of functionality in the grand scheme of things, honestly, because you're getting a slightly smaller touchscreen. Yes, the instrument cluster is slightly smaller, but I mean, you're still getting the same software. The same functionality is there. It's just on a smaller display. And you get all this beautiful wood. It actually feels like a car instead of like an iPhone.
It does feel like, especially in the SUV context, or larger vehicles in general, where you may have more people, the promise of letting somebody who's not driving the car access the technology in a meaningful way, I think is smart. I would say I haven't, with hyperscreen, like my experience with it has been lightweight, so I have not really like pushed that capability. And in other cases, I'm thinking the Stellantis, the Jeep stuff, like it just doesn't work particularly well. It works it doesn't work seamlessly. It doesn't work like with devices that we already kind of have in hand in a way that makes it useful. So like, I love that idea. Intellectually, I love the idea. I think in practice, I have personally have yet to find the perfect way to kind of use that, or like I said, make good on the promise. We got a couple of early answers to the long-term question. Jonathan said get a Lucid Air, a standard model. I'm not like a Lucid Air, like one of the more inexpensive ones would be a really good choice, actually. Nick, I'm not sure if you're responding to the long-term question, but he's saying maybe he's suggesting that we get a used Tesla Model 3 or Model Y and then change out the springs. We're not in Germany, unfortunately. We're all based in the U.S., but we could definitely do some high-speed cruising and test before and after. That's a bit of a maintenance project too. So one, we have to get an old Tesla, and two, we have to invest in some retrofitting of it. I would be fascinated by the results of that. So it's at least an interesting idea. And then we definitely like something from some of the stuff that General Motors is working on from across price points, but something like the Equinox EV will be really interesting. It's not going to be available for us in the time frame. We're looking at something that we can get this year. So remember, a lot of the vehicles that we're writing news about, or even testing, we on this podcast talked about Volkswagen's ID7 last week, are not actually going to be available to buy and in like the consumer space, or even in media fleets for a year in some cases, right? So we're definitely ahead of the curve. We know more than we can test, and certainly long-term tests. But next year, Equinox might be a fantastic answer to this question. Cool. All right. So we've been saving sort of the best, or maybe potentially gripiest for last. Jeff Perez, great guy, noted BMW critic, has been in a BMW Z4 for the last week.
Don't break my heart, Jeff.
Well, I'm glad we're not talking
it's purple.
It's purple. Ta-da!
Honestly, Jeff was asking what car he should talk about because he has a few options, and he mentioned like 5 minutes into the discussion that this car was purple, and I was really upset that he didn't lead with that.
Well, I was going to suggest that we talk about the M2 that I drove a few weeks ago, but I know me and Brandon would be arguing for an hour, so we couldn't do that.
We can squeeze a little M2 argument in too, but let's start with Z4.
So here's the new Z4 2023 facelift. It's purple now, which is cool. It's also not
they're all purple.
It's also not a standard color. I found out. I thought this would be a standard color. Let me look at the sheet right here. $650 for Thunder Night Metallic, which you can also get on. It's not bad.
BMW doesn't have standard colors anymore. You can get white.
Alpine white, yeah. Alpine white is a freebie.
So yeah, purple. The front end is a little different. I think the grille inserts, the mesh in the grille is now vertical as opposed to horizontal. There's some different detailing down on the base of the bumper. You get the cool, what is that? What is the badge? It's the M Sport anniversary badge.
Yeah, 50th anniversary, or 50th anniversary M badge.
Yeah, I like that badge a lot. And of course, this is the M40i, so it's got the 6-cylinder, 382 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. It's actually a really quick car. It gets up pretty quickly. Like I was actually surprised at how fast, especially put it in sport mode, how quickly it gets up to speed. But yeah, in general, it feels like, I don't know. It's hard to describe this car because you're like, okay, this is technically a Supra platform, right? This is the Z4 and Supra. And the Supra I do like a lot. It has a little bit of charm to it. This thing is just kind of charmless other than the purple paint. It's very BMW and very straightforward and harsh to drive. The technology is good. It does not have iDrive 8s. And yeah, that's about it. I don't know. I feel like I don't have that much positive to say about it other than the fact that it's purple.
It's got a lot of, like, with the redesign, I think it did in the past. This generation Z4 just always has, but with the redesign, it has more kind of 6 Series vibes to me a little bit, that really wide and flat nose. So I don't know. I'd have to see it in person, but I tend to agree with what you're saying, Jeff, and some of the comments here, that it's not maybe the best looking Z3, Z4 car that we've seen in a long time. This has always been a weird model for BMW. Let me just say that. Like, I think, and you know, we have some no. I was just gonna say, like BMW Z cars have their components. I think that they have historically been models that are compelling to drive. And then there have been ones that, even if you get into one today and really enjoy it, if you were doing a comparative, like a contemporary test at the time, you would say it's not the sharpest, it's not the quickest, it's not the fastest around a racetrack, it's not the easiest to live with. Whether or not the synthesis of things still comes together to be a really great roadster in your mind is kind of an open question. And I think sometimes yes and sometimes no. But again, correct me if I'm wrong. Has Z4 ever been the class leader in any of this space?
I think it was really interesting. I think the first generation Z4M was a very interesting car because they finally figured out that flame surfacing design language in a way that was really attractive, and it had the E46 M3's straight six engine, and like that was a pretty fantastically charming package. Since then, the two generations of Z4 since then, I'm not really sure what they've been trying to do with it, but I think that
more in like the grand touring perspective, like the second generation Z was a hardtop 4,000 pound convertible. I mean, it was like a budget SL more than a sports car.
But the biggest problem that I think the Z4 has always had is that the Porsche Boxster has existed and it's done both the sporty and the touring bits of the equation a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't, there's nothing like super engaging about this car to drive. I mean, it feels very much like a BMW, and I know that's kind of like a vague toss out term, but like it's so stiff and like rigid, just straightforward, like driving experience, nothing special. It doesn't feel like, I don't know. Like I said, it just doesn't charm you at all. And I don't know what my problem is with it. Maybe it's just me and a BMW like issue, but I drove the SL.
Was your grandma like hit by a BMW as like a child? Like, do you just have like this deeply ingrained?
I don't know. Every time I drive, not every BMW, because if you go read my XM review, you'll see that that thing was amazing. But like, I drove the SL relatively recently, and that thing is so much more fun. Like the engine's so much better. I think the interior is a lot nicer. This also feels
also
really
double the price.
It's also $150,000 to start.
But the interior for this also just feels very, very cramped. And I know Jonathan Brown is asking some good questions, like with the window open and the top up. I'd have to look and see if I'd have to test it and see if the buffeting is as bad as Super, but I don't think it would be.
I wouldn't think it would be. I think the main concern I would have is cowl shake with the roof up. Like that's always something in convertibles that's really annoyed the hell out of me.
Even that, I was gonna say, like that's another one here. Like how is it flexy or is it rigid, right? Like I mean, I can't, like, first of all, you guys brought it to mind, more old guy shit, but the facelift version of the first Z4 was the first BMW program I ever did. I got to drive it around Road America, and even then I remember talking to kind of the old heads saying like, convertibles don't flex anymore, right? It's not really a thing. It's a thing we always talk about. Like I can't tell you in going on close to 20 years of testing cars where I was ever in a convertible that wasn't like some sort of weird one, like a one-off or built by overtuned or something like that, where it felt like it was truly flexible in a way that you get from like old British roadsters and like cars, even convertibles from like the 1980s. And 1990s had a lot more, had real rigidity problems. That just doesn't really exist. So not having driven this car, Jeff can tell me I'm 100% wrong. My guess is that you can go flat out around a corner and the car doesn't move even a tiny bit. Like it's completely rigid, right?
Yeah, no, I haven't driven a convertible either that felt like it was flexing in a long time, if at all, because I'm much younger. But this one is actually 73 grand as tested.
That seems like a pretty fair, like a pretty decent price, honestly. Like considering what a similarly quick Boxster costs, and the Boxster there's no way the Boxster is going to sound this good unless you spring for a GTS 4.0.
Yeah, the Boxster comparison is always interesting, right? Because I mean, I don't know that it really makes sense in 2023, like in terms of pricing and what people want. It's always been a kind of a difficult thing because you do kind of have to go back to the root of the question, which is Some people just want a front engine rear drive car, right? Some people don't. Some people want a mid engine car, and they're very different experiences. And I wouldn't say that one, if taken off a racetrack, I don't think that one is inherently better to drive, quote unquote, than the other.
I want to highlight
BMW
real quick.
Z cars,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say BMW Z cars. I mean, yeah, like the Boxster is the most obvious comparison, but it's still the base Boxster, not even the S, is a $70,000 car to start. So, you know, and that's always been the case. It's always been you get the top engine in a BMW Z3 or Z4 for the price of a base Porsche Boxster. So, you know, like, power's not everything, and I agree that I think a base Boxster would probably be a much more enjoyable vehicle to live with than a fully loaded M40i. But if you want 380 horsepower and you don't want to spend 150 grand, you know.
I want to highlight what Mark Rollins said, because I wholeheartedly agree. Give us EV convertibles. Build them, you cowards. Build them.
I mean, first of all, it's already we had this debate a couple of weeks ago, right? We had at least one already. We had Tesla Roadster. In theory, we're getting another Tesla Roadster at some point too. I'm sure it'll be fantastic if and when it exists. The only issue is part of the joy of convertibles, like for all of us who've owned them, or many of us who've driven lots of different ones, is that they also can be lightweight, right? So like this. Where the magic comes together is where you've got an open top, a very low curb weight, excellent handling, and rear drive, no matter where the engine is. Put those things together in a shaker, and I don't care what it looks like, that is going to be a fun car to drive in almost every formulation. With an EV version of that, like, can you get the weight down? Can you do some? We're talking, you know, like Maserati is doing some really interesting things with where they're kind of dog bone shaped, their T-shaped battery packs, so that there's more mass in the middle and less out at the corners, which has a really dramatically good effect on handling, but not necessarily on weight. I think that there are some solutions that can make drivers convertibles, electric drivers convertibles in the future. But I don't know that it's gonna be something that doesn't reach an exotic price tag in the near future, right?
They're still trying to figure out drivers convertible or drivers EVs right now, so
exactly,
it's going to be a little while before we get a drivers EV convertible. But as like a big luxury statement, you know, I'm thinking like Rolls-Royce Phantom drop head, like a Spectre drop head would be glorious. Sick.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, are we closing the books on the BMW Z4? Did we leave any meat on the bone? Brett, do you have any Z feelings that you need to get off your chest?
So many Z feelings. I will point out.
Please disclose. Please disclose.
I will just point out that every Z4 since my beloved 2000, well, I have a 2006, but since the 2003, they've all had Z graphics on the side, on the side profile of the car. And you do get that on the new one. So that's my favorite part of the Z lineage. Probably the only thing I like about the new one is that it has a Z on the side.
I don't think Brandon was there for this, but years ago I worked at a place called Winding Road, and we did a comparison test with a Boxster, a base Boxster, a Z4, and something else that I don't remember. Maybe it was a 350 Z.
It was a 350. I remember reading it. Like, I remember looking it up for like reference shit, but like I was not there yet.
And I remember doing that drive. It was an awesome day, fantastic day of driving. We're just going around like the one good road around here, swapping cars and having a good time. And my boss at the time was there, who was a very analytical guy, really, really smart guy, who certainly had driven more cars than me at that point. And I got out and was sort of declaring the Z4 the winner. I was like, I get it. I get the mid-engine thing. It's great. It's more precise. I just want to drive the Z4 more. And I'll never forget his answer, because it's one that I've stolen many times over in the subsequent years, which was, "You're wrong. Let me tell you why you're wrong." It's like, I'm expressing an opinion here, but nevertheless, I got the
I remember reading a few when I bought my car. I bought it sight unseen from my sister, and I actually didn't really like the Z4 when I bought it. I thought it was kind of an ugly machine, and she was just selling it, so I was like, sure, I guess I'll buy it from you. And I looked up a few comparison tests with Boxsters and 370Zs and TTs, and the Z4 won like 3 of the 5 that I read. So I don't think you're alone.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. It was a great day, and I remember it as being a car that I still love. So, yeah, RIP Audi TT going away. Cool. Cool. All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for joining. This has been a fun one. Thank you, commenters, for all of the feedback. Again, if you guys are watching this after we're live, please leave comments or question for us on the YouTube channel, and we will go in and try and answer any that we can. If you guys ever want to listen to this podcast on streaming while you're traveling or doing something else, we go live every Thursday, but we're putting it on audio streaming services, so iTunes, and what is the Play Store? Why can't I remember any place where I listen to podcasts now? I'm just completely
Spotify,
blank.
Google Play,
Spotify,
Apple,
yeah.
or Apple Podcast app. I don't know, wherever you get your podcast from.
Wherever you get your podcast, you can get this one on the same feed as Rambling About Cars from Motor1. So we encourage you to do that, like and subscribe, and all of that good stuff. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next week. Playoffs are starting. Go Celtics. That's why I wear this hat. Go Celtics.